Miranda Devine is an intrepid investigator and esteemed opinionator at the New York Post. She's here to talk about all things 2024. And also, we're going to talk about her fabulous new book that you need to get. It's called The Big Guy: How a President and His Son Sold Out America. Wonder who in the world would that be about? Well, we'll find out tonight. Would you please give a big welcome to Miranda Devine? Great to have you here, Miranda.
Thank you very much, Governor.
I always enjoy watching your commentaries on television, but it was 4 years ago this very month that you broke the story about Hunter Biden's laptop. And you were so appreciated for that. And people, particularly in the world of journalism, thanked you and gave you many awards for that. Yeah, right. Actually, what they did, they shut you and the entire New York Post down, wouldn't let this story appear on social media sites, censored it everywhere. The government took an active role in trying to get it censored. And then, with all of that going on, you got banned from Facebook and were told you couldn't say those things. But 51 former intelligence agencies said that it was all a Russian hoax. I want to go back to 4 years ago. Were you stunned that your own government was lying so, just viciously about the story?
Look, Governor Huckabee, we didn't really know as much as we know today about the government's role and the role of the CIA and the FBI, the Department of State and so on in censoring our story and lying about it, saying that the laptop, Hunter Biden's abandoned laptop, and therefore our stories were Russian disinformation. At the time, we just thought, well, Facebook and Twitter are woke. They don't want Donald Trump to win the election. They prefer Joe Biden. That's why they've basically cancelled us and locked our account for 2 weeks until just a few days before the election. What we found afterwards through the Twitter files and through various whistleblowers is that it was the FBI that coerced Twitter and Facebook to censor our story. And they had pre-bunked our story for weeks ahead of, before we had even published. They'd gone and had these meetings with big tech, and they had told them to look out in October for a Russian hack and leak operation likely about Hunter Biden. And so, of course, when Twitter and Facebook saw our stories, they immediately recognised them as the vile Russian disinformation that FBI had been warning them about for weeks. And it was a simple decision, I guess, for them to cancel, but the FBI knew better. They'd had the laptop for 10 months. They knew it wasn't Russian disinformation.
I'm sure they apologized to you later on and said how sorry they were that they accused you of something like that.
Of course not.
Well, and that's what is so disturbing. The fact that the very government agencies that all of us pay for, whether we're liberal or conservative, would use the power of the public trust and say, we're not going to let your information go out there, even though it was later proven that what you said was 100% correct.
Absolutely. And, the FBI knew that it was correct. They had already vetted the laptop. They'd found that it was fit to be used in a court of law, which it later was, that it had not been tampered with. They had been spying on President Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, for months. So they would have known that he had in his possession the laptop, and they would have known that the New York Post was about to publish. So that was an op to make sure that derogatory information about Joe Biden did not see the light of day. And then even worse than that, you mentioned the letter from the 51 former intelligence officials. Most of those were CIA. And in fact, that letter, falsely claiming that the laptop was Russian disinformation, was given the green light by the then CIA director, Gina Haspel, under Donald Trump. So again, another op, a domestic CIA operation for election interference to ensure that Donald Trump didn't win.
What's frightening is that there were people who supposedly were working for Donald Trump, and he had appointed them, put them in their places, and they were actively working to undermine him at every single turn. That is disturbing because we only have one president who is elected by the people. Those who are appointed or employed are supposed to serve at his pleasure. They're not supposed to basically conduct what amounts to a coup.
Exactly. And, you know, Donald Trump talked about the deep state, but I don't even think until he took office he realised the full extent of their power and unaccountability. They have an agenda that is at odds to what the American people want, particularly in foreign policy. You see how their agenda works by the disasters under Joe Biden and under Barack Obama, world on fire. Under Donald Trump, who just approached foreign policy like everything else, like a property developer from Queens, on first principles, using logic and common sense. Everything around the world sort of, Putin was in his box, Kim Jong-un from North Korea was in his box, Iran was on its knees, no one was attacking Israel, ISIS was vanquished. You know, Donald Trump achieved a lot just by not following the deep state's agenda.
And that's what I think people love about him most. He is not somebody who goes and asks the people of D.C., what would you like me to do?
Yes.
He asked the people of America, what would you like for me to do? And people kind of like that. Just like you broke a huge story of the laptop 4 years ago, this book is a stunning expose of what people in the kind of inside Biden world call the big guy. Who was the big guy?
The big guy is Joe Biden, our esteemed president, and that was the nickname that his son and his former business partners used to refer to him because the family was paranoid that anyone would find out the extent of Joe Biden's involvement in his son Hunter's overseas business dealings, which, if you remember, during the 2020 campaign was a refrain of Joe Biden's. He insisted that he knew nothing about Hunter's business deals.
You don't believe that, do you?
Well, I mean, it's impossible to believe it when you see the evidence, not just the evidence on the laptop, but there was evidence uncovered by the Republicans in Congress once they took power after the 2022 midterms and had subpoena power, and also from a lot of valiant whistleblowers. From the IRS, there were two really brave and incredibly effective whistleblowers who were the lead investigators in a Hunter Biden investigation in Delaware. And they could no longer live with their consciences about the obstruction from the Department of Justice and the prosecutors to let Hunter Biden and his father off the hook and to prevent any inquiry, them following the evidence trail wherever it led to Joe Biden. That was banned. And then there were other whistleblowers, including Hunter Biden's two former best friends and business partners. They were whistleblowers as well, and they testified. And they've all the whistleblowers involved, named and unnamed, have really done heroic service for the American people because it was important, even though the Bidens may not be brought to account in a legal sense, it was important that the influence peddling that they engaged in during Joe Biden's vice presidency, hauling in millions of dollars from China and Russia and Ukraine and so on, that be known, but also the role of the deep state, because these same people who covered up for Joe Biden are now propping up Kamala Harris. They are the puppeteers behind the scene, are the same people that ensured that Joe Biden did all the terrible things that made China stronger and America weaker, that led to the war in Ukraine. Those same people will be controlling Kamala Harris.
You know, here's what I don't understand. You outline, and you don't just say, I've heard this is anonymous source. You go into great detail in the book, and you provide deep, well-documented facts. You just said something that disturbs me. You said, they probably will never be held accountable. And I want to know why not? Why won't they be held accountable? It's not like the evidence hasn't been presented. You've done it in this book. James Comer, his committee, he has done a lot of this kind of work. Why will nothing come to be from this?
Partly because Joe Biden has pardon power, and even though he has said that he will not pardon his son Hunter, we know that he will. Hunter was only ever convicted both in Delaware on gun felony charges and in California he pleaded guilty on tax fraud charges, only because of those IRS whistleblowers I mentioned. Hunter was set to get this incredible plea deal. Instead, after the whistleblowers came forward, he ended up being charged and convicted. And so that should carry a pretty hefty jail term for both those cases. But his father will let him off, and the media will let Joe Biden off the hook too, because they'll say, look, he's a loving father and, you know, he's had so much tragedy in his life, how can you blame him? As for Joe Biden, we saw with the Robert Hur special counsel investigation into the mishandling alleged of classified material, that even though the special counsel found that Joe Biden had, you know, a case to answer, that he decided not to charge him because he said that no jury would convict because Joe Biden at 81 with fading cognition was an elderly man with a fading memory, and they would feel sorry for him.
Well, I feel sorry for the country right now because we've allowed this to keep going. And you wonder, if you or I would be held accountable, why shouldn't anyone be held accountable? But it certainly doesn't look like it's going to happen. Miranda, I hope that the book, and it already will be, a huge bestseller. It's called The Big Guy, How a President and His Son Sold Out America. I hope you will get a copy and read it. If you say, oh, that's just a bunch of talk, read the book and then say that. I dare you, because she outlines it and documents it. It's not just allegations. If you want to follow Miranda on social media and to get your own copy of the great book, The Big Guy, if you go to her guest page that we will link you to at Huckabee.tv, we'll tell you exactly how to get the book. That's Huckabee.tv, and then go to her guest page.